watching the situation, the state visit of the president of Western Sahara, or should I say the president of the Saharawi Arab Democratic Republic. That's the president there, who is making a state visit to South Africa. Govan, good morning to you. And I just want to extrapolate from a statement here that was issued by our government as to this statement or this state visit. The statement goes to say the two presidents will exchange views on recent developments related to the question of Western Sahara, including the mobilization of regional, continental and international support toward finding a sustainable solution to the Western Sahara conflict. And this particular line quite important there, Govan. The Western Sahara conflict in line with the provisions of the 1991 ceasefire agreement. That 1991 ceasefire agreement, Govan, directly relates to the 1991 UN resolution to hold a referendum on the independence of Western Sahara, which seems to have been abandoned. This appears to be top of the agenda, the independence of Western Sahara from Morocco.
Indeed, in the 1991 ceasefire agreement, agreeing on that referendum is top of the agenda here because South Africa is still pushing towards that referendum to have Morocco agree to the independence of the Western Sahara, the Saharawi Arab Democratic Republic. And the state visit today by the President Brahim Ghali is meant to not only get South Africa to strengthen its lobby of the regional groups, SADC, which has already set up a number of missions in the Western Sahara, but also, importantly, the West African economic states and the East African economic states under the ECOWAS banner. And this is important because the African Court for Human and People's Rights recently declared the occupation of the Western Sahara by the Moroccan military as illegal, South Africa describing Morocco as an illegal occupier in that region and calling for the respect of the Sahrawi people's mineral resources rights in that area. Of course, that would lead to the opening up of more avenues of potential trade, but with regards to the referendum, we spoke to the Deputy Minister of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, Deputy Minister Alvin Whittles, a short while ago on why exactly they were pushing for that and what was top of agenda for today's talks. It's all about self-determination, and we'll show you some visuals from the union buildings here where we're expecting President Ghali in a short while. But before we do that, let's listen to the Deputy Minister outlining the position of South Africa that it's trying to communicate to the world, even as more African states seem to be strengthening diplomatic ties with Morocco while theoretically supporting the independence of the Western Sahara.
Well, of course, we are privileged to host President Ghali, who is the president of the Saharawi Arab Democratic Republic. This visit will be an embodiment of what Pan-Africanism means, solidarity with the oppressed and the most vulnerable. That is our value system, our value proposition as a South African people. We have been one with the people of Western Sahara in as early as 1976 when the colonial power at that time, Spain, actually ceded basically the territory in what we think was back to the people of Western Sahara. Unfortunately, we had a situation where the Kingdom of Morocco have not had the same optics on, and we had a protracted conflict that resulted in the 1991 ceasefire agreement. That ceasefire was pivoted on an approach where there is going to be a referendum that should result in self-determination of the for the people of Western Sahara. And that is the AU position. That is also the position of the UN Security Council that we are advancing in South Africa.
All right, Govan, Whittles, we've just had this soundbite from the Deputy Minister of DERCO, Alvin Bottas, and he talks directly to the element that we started on, and it's got to do with that UN resolution that there be a referendum. Now, it's important, I suppose, to set the context for South Africans who may not be familiar with the story of Western Sahara. There is a long-running feud between South Africa and the Kingdom of Morocco about the political status of Western Sahara. Morocco claims that Western Sahara is part of its southern province. But on the other hand, South Africa is saying Western Sahara needs to be and ought to be an independent state, which is why they use the words self-determination. If that 1991 UN resolution for a referendum, Govan, seems to be abandoned at this stage, I suppose the question is, can political negotiations break the deadlock or resolve this matter?
Key to that answer would be whether or not the African Union's Peace and Security Council would be able to lobby all of its members to get behind a call for the full implementation of that resolution, of that 1991 ceasefire. And South Africa's position on the Saharawi Arab Democratic Republic has been consistent since the 1970s. The question that's dividing Morocco and South Africa here is whether the Spanish indeed ceded the territories to Morocco or to the people of the Western Sahara. And since Morocco has held the view that it was ceded to them as a kingdom, they've maintained that that is part of its southernmost province. But one of the interesting calls that have come from the presidency has been for the United Nations Security Council to also recognize the need for the implementation of the 1991 ceasefire, the need for the implementation of the UN resolution, but to follow the African Court of Human and People's Rights decision that the existence or the occupation of the area of the Western Sahara by the Moroccan military is illegal. And that question will be raised sharply here at today's state visit, we expect, and what kind of action should be expected from South Africa and more generally the SADC region following that declaration from the African Court of Human and People's Rights will be a question that we'll put to the President and the President of the Saharawi Arab Democratic People's Republic. Let's take a look quickly at some of the visuals here at the Union buildings. We have some of the ministers that are going through the motions of the state visit. What will happen in a few moments is that the Chief of State Protocol will receive the President as he comes to greet his counterpart under the amphitheater where the ministers are waiting on either side. Then they'll break away into prepared bilateral talks. We expect the opening remarks of those talks to be broadcast live. The talks themselves will be closed, but importantly, the President and the President of the Saharawi Arab Democratic Republic are due to hold a media briefing immediately after that. Of course, this won't be the first time they see each other. The two presidents are currently in what they call a tete-a-tete, where they're basically just exchanging greetings and getting ready for today's visits, also outlining the agenda for the state visit, which is centered on security and the right to self-determination, but importantly, as an offshoot, would involve the potential for trade if they were able to secure the territorial integrity of the Saharawi Arab Democratic Republic's resources. Of course, these are just some of the issues that we expect them to raise, and exactly what South Africa's final position will be regarding its intention to lobby the SADC states, the ECOWAS states, the Community of West African States, and then, of course, the United Nations Security Council, as alluded to in an interview with Newzroom Afrika yesterday by the presidential spokesperson, Mr. Vincent Mugwenya. We'll find out at the end of the day. But as you rightly said, this issue is about self-determination, but it's also about that long-standing relationship between the people of the Saharawi Arab Democratic Republic and South Africa, which goes back to the 1970s, 1976 to be more specific. In South Africa, seen as a champion of the right to self-determination, looks like it will be taking the lead, certainly in sub-Saharan Africa, in fighting for the right to the respect of the territorial integrity of the people of the Saharawi Arab Democratic Republic.
Govan, you and I are going to stay on for a little while we try to get to grips with these issues. Let me pick up on the element about mobilizing for Western Sahara to finally be independent. And this is a fight that South Africa clearly is taking up with much gusto. And again, I want to borrow from that short statement that they issued, where they say mobilization of regional, continental and international support for a lasting solution is what they are going to be seized with here. And I suppose that prompts the question about just how much support does South Africa have in this, what they say is a principled stance. And they're saying they won't be swayed, by the way, because I've been looking at the various statements that they have made in the past, and they are very clear that they are not going to be swayed in what they say is a principled stance that Morocco is, quote unquote, occupying Western Sahara, and they even go further to use a much more stronger term that this amounts to colonization of the people of Western Sahara. Question is just how many other countries, particularly within the continent, are talking the same language with South Africa?
Well, that's an interesting development because a number of the SADC countries have already set up their mission states, so that would be at least 7 of them. And then in a piece written on the Institute for Security Studies' website by international relations analyst Peter Fabricius, he outlines that while the Western Sahara, or the Saharawi Arab Democratic Republic, is fighting for recognition among the African countries, especially with diplomatic status, in theory, they are losing the number of African countries that have recognized them, which is down from, I believe, 15 countries down to 11 on the continent, with the majority of them including the SADC states. And the countries that are not recognizing the Western Sahara and instead strengthening their diplomatic relations with the Moroccan kingdom are predominantly focused on the West African states closer to the French. We know that South Africa and France's diplomatic relations are strong, but they had been strained since 2013, and South Africa has been working hard to strengthen them again. But in this instance, their fight for more countries to recognize the Saharawi Arab Democratic Republic is not yet gaining momentum. It may be gaining momentum among the SADC states, and South Africa occupies an influential position in the African Union, but in terms of the Community of West African States particularly, there's a decline which is leading to strengthening of diplomatic relations with Morocco instead of the Saharawi Arab Democratic Republic. Of course, the countries that will be targeted for lobbying for the formal recognition and diplomatic status of the Saharawi Arab Democratic Republic will be outlined here after the state visit and during that media briefing. Exactly what South Africa's strategy will be should also be outlined, but we already know that it involves the AU's Peace and Security Council and lobbying more countries in that Security Council who have strengthen those ties with Morocco, even in the face of South Africa's intense lobbying for the establishment of ties with the Saharawi Arab Democratic Republic.
Govan Whittles, let's pause there for a moment, and I'm sure we'll take you back to Govan Whittles as soon as that inspection, if you want to call it that, or that short parade that the two presidents are likely to make at any moment in